Aaron Mac BS Detector back for another round of reading. Let's get this over with. Let's get this book done so that we can. I think next we're going to go to the Tavistock Institute, because now that I've basically established by reading you, like, I don't know, 3 different books, that these people are not the people from the Bible, we can actually get into a little bit about the meddling in Western culture that they've been doing for at least a century through the Tavistock Institute, because it's going to be really good. And then I think after that, maybe if people still don't get it, we'll read The Invention of the Jayish People by Shlomo Sands, a Jay himself, clearly. And but dude, it's a long one, and like, this one's not so bad because the letters are pretty big. But look how little the letters are in this. The letters in this book are like teents, and look how thick it is. So that one might take us a good little while to get through. But anyways, I want to try to finish this in this reading, and I think we'll be able to. Anyways, all right. So this is section 4 of chapter, what did I say? 8? Yeah, race and myth. All right. And yet, to return to the paradox, and this is for entertainment and educational purposes only, for commentary, and all that jazz. All right. So it says, and yet, to return to the paradox, many people who are neither racialists nor anti-Shemites, like that is a meaningless term, anti-Semite, meaningless, are convinced that they are able to recognize a J at a single glance. How is this possible if Jays are such a hybrid lot as history and anthropology show them to be? Part of the answer, I think, was given by Ernest Renan in 1883, quote, Il n'y a pas un type juif, il y a des types juifs. That's got to be French. The type of J who can be recognized, quote, at a glance as one particular type among many others, but only a small fraction of 14 million J's belong to that particular type, and those who appear to belong to it are by no means always J's. So people have thought I am. I'm like, bro, my nose is like straight. I mean, is it big? Is it huge? I don't know. But I'm not a J. I am Scottish, pretty much. Scotch-Irish, I don't know. Welsh, Western European. Anyways, so I don't know why they put, to quote Ernest Renan in 1883, and then quote a bunch of French, like we're reading an English book. Maybe you should have translated that so we can know what it says. Anyways, so it says the type of J who can be recognized, quote, at a glance as one particular type among many others, but only a small fraction of 14 million J's belong to that particular type, and those who appear to belong to it are by no means always J's. One of the most prominent features, literally and metaphorically, which is said to characterize the particular type, is the nose, variously described as Semitic, aquiline, hooked, or resembling the beak of an eagle. But surprisingly, among 2,863 J's in New York City, Fishberg found that only 14%, i.e. 1 person in 7, had a hooked nose, while 57% were straight-nosed, 20% were snub-nosed, and 6.5% had flat and broad noses. Other anthropologists came up with similar results regarding Semitic noses in Poland and the Ukraine. Semitic, what does that even friggin' mean? Semitism actually, I think, has more to do with the language grouping than any kind of blood relation of anything. Or at least that's what I've been told. Okay. All right. Other anthropologists came up with similar results regarding Shemitic noses in Poland and the Ukraine. Moreover, among true Shemites, such as purebred Bedouins, I thought it was Bedouin. Bedouins? What does that even mean? And how do you know a true Shemite if all the genealogies were lost in 70 AD? I keep going back to that because I feel like that point needs to be driven home because people literally are not understanding. Okay. Moreover, some true Shemites, such as pure Bedouins, this form of nose does not seem to occur at all. On the other hand, it is, quote, very frequently met among the various Caucasian tribes, and also in Asia Minor, among the indigenous races in this region, such as the Armenians, Georgians, Ossets, Lesgians, Izors, and also the Syrians. Aquiline noses are the rule. Among the people living in the Mediterranean countries of Europe, as the Greeks, Italians, French, Spanish, and Portuguese, the aquiline nose is also more frequently encountered than among the Jays of Eastern Europe. The North American Indians also very often have Jayish noses. Thus, the nose alone is not a very safe guide to identification. Only a minority, a particular type of Jay, seems to have a convex nose, and lots of other ethnic groups also have it. The bankers, I feel like, though, they all seem to have it, don't they? Yet intuition tells one that the anthropologist's statistics must be somehow wrong. An ingenious way out of this conundrum was suggested by Bedeau and Jacobs, who maintained that the, quote, Jewish nose need not really be convex in profile and may yet give the impression of being hooked, due to a peculiar tucking up of the wings as and folding of the nostrils. See, here you go. Figure 1, figure 2, and figure 3. I feel like I might be figure 3. I don't know. I'm not Jayish, though. To prove this point, that it is this nostrility which provides the illusion of beakedness, Jacobs invites his readers to, quote, write a figure 6 with a long tail. Now remove the turn of the twist, as in figure 2, and much of the Jewishness disappears, and it vanishes entirely when we draw the lower continuation horizontally, as in figure 3. Ripley, quoting Jacobs' comments, quote, behold the transformation. The Jew has turned Roman beyond doubt. What have we proven then? That there is in reality such a phenomenon as a Jewish nose, even though it be differently constituted from our first assumption, the criterion of convexity. But is there? Figure 1 could still represent an Italian or Greek or Spanish or Armenian or Red Indian nose, nostrility included. That it is a Jayish and not a Red Indian, Armenia, etc. nose, we deduce at a glance from the context of other features, including expression, comportment, dress. It is not a process of logical analysis, but rather in the nature of the psychologist's gestalt perception, the grasping of a configuration as a whole. Similar considerations apply to each of the facial features considered to be typically Jayish. Quote, sensuous lips, end quote, dark, wavy, or crinkly hair, melancholy or cunning or bulging or slit Mongol eyes, and so forth. Taken separately, they are common property of the most varied nations. Put together like an identikit, they combine into a prototype of, to say it once more, one particular type of J, of Eastern European origin. The type with which we are familiar, but our identikit would not fit the various other types of Jays, such as the Sephardim, including their very Anglicized descendants in Britain, nor the Slavonic type of Central Europe, nor the blonde Teutonic, the slit-eyed Mongoloid, or the crinkly-haired Negroid types of the Jays. Nor can we be sure to recognize with certainty even this limited prototype. The collection of portraits published by Fishberg or Ripley can be used for a, quote, believe it or not game. Like Ripley's Believe It or Not. If you cover the caption indicating whether the portraited person is a Jay or Gentile, the same game can be played on a cafe terrace anywhere near the shores of the Mediterranean. It will, of course, remain inconclusive because you cannot walk up to the experimental subject and inquire after his or her religion. And that's another thing. It is a religion, not a race. But if you play the game in company, the amount of disagreements between the observers' verdicts will be a surprise. Suggestibility also plays a part. Quote, did you know that Harold is Jayish? End quote. quote, no, but now that you mention it, of course I can see it, end quote. Did you know that this or that royal family has Jayish blood? No, but now that you mention it, dot, 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 end quote. Hutchinson's Races of Mankind has a picture of three geishas with the caption, Japanese with Jayish physiognomy. Once you have read the caption, you feel, quote, but of course, how could I have missed it, end quote. And when you have played this game for some time, you begin to see Jayish features or Khazar features everywhere. Section 5. A further source of confusion is the extreme difficulty of separating hereditary characteristics from those shaped by the social background and other factors in the environment. We have come across this problem when discussing bodily stature as an alleged racial criterion, that the influence of social factors on physiognomy, conduct, speech, gesture, and costume works in subtler and more complex ways in assembling the Jewish identikit. Clothing plus coiffure, which is the hair, is the most obvious of these factors. Fit out anybody with a long corkscrew sidelock, skull cap, broad-rimmed black hat, and long black kaftan, and you recognize at a glance the orthodox Jayish type. Whatever his nostrility, he will look Jayish. There are other less drastic indicators among the sartorial preferences of certain types of Jays of certain social classes, combined with accents and mannerisms of speech, gesture, and social behavior. It may be a welcome diversion to get away for a moment from the Jays and listen to a French writer describe how his compatriots can tell an Englishman, quote, at a glance. Michel Laris, apart from being an eminent writer, as director of research at the Centre National de la Recherche Scientifique and staff member of the Musée de l'Homme. De l'Homme is the Museum of Man. De l'Homme. Okay. It is absurd to talk about an English, quote, race, or even to regard the English as being of the, quote, Nordic race. In point of fact, history teaches that, like all the people of Europe, the English people have become what it is through successive contributions of different people. England is a Celtic country, partially colonized by successive waves of Saxons, Danes, and Normans from France, with some addition of Roman stock from the age of Julius Caesar onwards. And that, let me just stop right there. How they talk about Caucasians. All white people are not Caucasians. And it really gets on my dang nerves when, people are out here calling just all white people Caucasians. I will stop and correct somebody and tell them that I am Anglo-Saxon. I am not Caucasian. Do not call me that. It's an insult. Anyways. Moreover, while an Englishman can be identified by his way of dressing or even by his behavior, it is impossible to tell that he is an Englishman merely from his physical appearance. Among the English, as among other Europeans, there are both fair people and dark, tall men and short, dolichocephalics, and brachycephalics. It may be claimed that an Englishman can be readily identified from certain external characteristics which give him a, quote, look of his own, restraint in gesture, unlike the conventional gesticulating Southerner, gait and facial expression, all expressing what is usually included under the rather vague term of phlegm. Interesting word, use of the word phlegm. However, anyone who has made this claim would likely to be found at fault in many instances, for by no means all the English have these characteristics, and even if they are the characteristics of the, quote, typical Englishman, the fact would still remain that these outward characteristics are not, quote, physique in the true sense. Bodily attitudes, emotions, and expressions of the face all come under the heading of behavior, and being habits determined by the subject's social background are cultural, not, quote, natural. Moreover, though loosely describable as traits, they typify not a whole nation, but a particular social group within it, and thus cannot be included among the distinctive marks of race. However, when Lyrie says that facial expressions are not physique, but, quote, come under the heading of behavior, end quote, he seems to overlook the fact that behavior can modify the features of individuals and thus leave its stamp on their, quote, physique. Only one has to think of certain physical traits on the physiognomies of aging ham actors. of priests living in celibacy, of career soldiers, convicts serving long sentences, sailors, farmers, and so on. Their way of life affects not only their facial expression, but also their physical features, thus giving the mistaken impression that these traits are of hereditary or racial origin. If I may add a personal observation, I frequently met on visits to the United States Central European friends of my youth who immigrated before World War II and whom I had not seen for some 30 or 40 years. Each time I was astonished to find that they not only dressed, spoke, ate, and behaved like Americans, but had acquired an American physiognomy. I am unable to describe the change except that it has something to do with the broadening of the jaw and a certain look in and around the eyes. Quote, an anthropologist friend attributed the former to the increased use of the jaw musculature in American enunciation, and the look as a reflection of the rat race and the resulting propensity for duodenal ulcers. Interesting. I had somebody stop me one time at a jewelry store when I was like, I don't know, like 22 or 23, and they literally came up to me and were speaking French. And I was like, what? And I was literally working for a man who was from Pakistan. But these people legit thought I was French. And I was like, yeah, I don't know. I don't even know how to say I don't speak French. So that I just found that to be interesting. And then literally a week later, it was like summertime. And I was very, very tan. And one of my friends, Tisha, had braided my hair in like straight back cornrows. And I had all these people mistaking me for a black person. So people are people, dude. This whole thing about race is like kind of dumb, you know? I think it's kind of dumb. Anyways, so an anthropologist friend attributed the former to the jaw muscular, the rat race, blah, blah, blah. I was pleased to discover that this was not due to my imagination playing tricks, for Fishberg, writing in 1910, made a similar observation. Quote, the cast of countenance changes very easily under a change of social environment. I have noted such a rapid change among immigrants to the United States. The new physiognomy is best noted when some of these immigrants return to their native homes. This fact offers excellent proof that the social elements in which a man moves exercises a profound influence on his physical features. End quote. Wow. Very interesting. The proverbial melting pot seems to be producing an American physiognomy, a more or less standardized phenotype emerging from a wide variety of genotypes. Even the purebred Chinese and Japanese of the States seem to be affected by the process to some extent. At any rate, one can often recognize an American face, quote, at a glance, regardless of dress and speech, and regardless of its owner's Italian, Polish, or German ancestry. Now, there was a footnote somewhere. Oh, okay. Traits are of hereditary or racial origin. Okay. Ennemond wrote in his essay, English Traits, every religious sect has its own physiognomy. The Methodists have acquired a face, the Quakers a face, the nuns a face. The Englishman will point out a dissenter by his manners. Trades and professions carve their own lines on faces and forms. Pretty interesting. Section 6. In any discussion of the biological and social inheritance of the jays, the shadow of the ghetto must loom large. The jays of Europe and America and even of North Africa are children of the ghetto. At no more than 4 or 5 generations removed, whatever their geographical origin within the ghetto walls, they lived everywhere in more or less the same milieu, subjected for several centuries to the same formative or deformative influences. From geneticists' point of view, we can distinguish 3 such major influences: inbreeding, genetic drift, and selection. Inbreeding may have played at a different period as large a part in Jayish racial history as its opposite, hybridization. What did I say? They was inbreeding. From biblical times to the era of enforced segregation, and again in modern times, miscegenation was the dominant trend. In between, there stretched 3 to 5 centuries, according to country, of isolation and inbreeding, both in the strict sense of consanguineous marriages and in the broader sense of endogamy within a small segregated group. Is it endogamy? Endogamy? I don't know. Inbreeding carries the danger of bringing deleterious recessive genes together and allowing them to take effect. The high incidence of congenital idiocy among the Jays has been known for a long time, like the Habsburg jaw. Okay. And was, in all probability, a result of protracted inbreeding and not, as some anthropologists asserted, a Semitic racial peculiarity. Well, they're not Semitic, so there's that. But mental and physical malformations are conspicuously frequent in remote alpine villages where the most of the tombstones in the churchyard show one half of a dozen family names. There are no Cohens or Levies amongst them. Anyways. But inbreeding may also produce champion racehorses through favorable gene combinations. Perhaps it contributed to the production of both cretins and geniuses among the children of the ghetto. It reminds one of Chaim Weizmann's dictum, quote, "The Jays are like other people, only more so," end quote. Yeah, they're the peopliest people that ever peopled. Okay. Sorry. But genetics has little information to offer in this field. Yeah, because they probably don't allow it. I think, like I said, it's totes illegal to go get a DNA test in Yasharel. Okay, another process by which may have profoundly affected the people in the ghetto is, quote, genetic drift, end quote, also known as the Sewell-Wright effect. It refers to the loss of hereditary traits in small isolated populations, either because none of its founding members happened to possess the corresponding genes, or because only a few possessed them but failed to transmit them to the next generation. Genetic drift can thus produce considerable transformation in the hereditary characteristics of small communities. The selective pressures active within the ghetto walls must have been of an intensity rarely encountered in history. For one thing, since the Jays were debarred from agriculture, they became completely urbanized, concentrated in towns or shtetls, which became increasingly overcrowded. As a result, to quote Shapiro, the devastating epidemics that swept medieval cities and towns would in the long run have been more selective on Jayish populations than on any others, leaving them with progressively greater immunity as time went on, and their modern descendants would therefore represent the survivors of a rigorous and specific selective process, end quote. This, he thinks, may account for the rarity of tuberculosis among Jays and their relative longevity, amply illustrated by statistics collected by Fishberg. The hostile pressures surrounding the ghetto ranged from cold contempt to sporadic acts of violence to organized pogroms. Several centuries of living in such conditions must have favored the survival of the glibest, the most pliant and mentally resilient. In a word, the ghetto type. I mean, dude, if they didn't just like keep trying to take over the damn world and subjugate everyone and like parasitize every freaking host country and kingdom of their wealth, pretending that they're God's chosen, then maybe they wouldn't have been kicked out of all these places. But I'm sorry, if you've been booted 109 times from somewhere, those host nations aren't the problem. You are, boo-boo. I'm sorry, but that is just... I mean, come on. Anyways. The hostile pressure surrounding the ghetto ranged from... Okay, wait. I already did that. Okay. Whether such psychological traits are based on hereditary dispositions on which the selective process operates or are transmitted by social inheritance through childhood conditioning is a question still hotly disputed among anthropologists. We do not even know to what extent a high IQ is attributable to heredity, and to what extent to milieu. Take, for instance, the Jays' once proverbial abstemiousness, which some authorities on alcoholism regarded as a racial trait, but one can just as well interpret it as another inheritance from the ghetto, the unconscious residue of living for centuries under precarious conditions which made it dangerous to lower one's guard. The Jay with the yellow star on his back had to remain cautious and sober, while watching with amused contempt the antics of the, quote, drunken goy, end quote. Revulsion against alcohol and other forms of debauch was instilled from parent to child in successive generations until the memories of the ghetto faded and With progressive assimilation, particularly in the Anglo-Saxon countries, the alcohol intake progressively increased. Thus, abstemiousness, like so many other Jayish characteristics, turned out to be, after all, a matter of social and not biological inheritance. Lastly, there is yet another evolutionary process, sexual selection, which may have contributed in producing the traits which we have come to regard as typically Jayish. Ripley seems to have been the first to suggest this. The J is radically mixed in the line of racial descent. He is, on the other hand, the legitimate heir to all Judaism as a matter of choice. And we know that Judaism is not the study of the Old Testament. It is the study of the Talmud. It's a whole totally different religion. Okay. As a matter of choice, it affected every detail of their life. Why should it not also react upon their ideal of physical beauty? And why not influence their sexual preferences as well as determine their choice in marriage? Its results thus became accentuated through her heredity. Yeah. They're told it's like totally legal in their religion for them to have relations with a 3-year-old goy child, then I'm sure they develop some predilections towards that. You know what I'm saying? Hollywood's full of them. Anyways, Ripley did not inquire into the ghetto's, quote, ideal of physical beauty, end quote, but Fishberg did and came up with an appealing suggestion, quote, to the strictly Orthodox Jay in Eastern Europe, a strong, muscular person is an Esau. The ideal of a son of Jacob was during the centuries before the middle of the 19th century, quote, a silken young man. A pretty boy. This was a delicate, anemic, willowy youth with a wistful expression, all brains and no brawn. But he continues, quote, in Western Europe and America, there is at present a strong tendency in the opposite direction. Many Jays are proud of the fact that they do not look like Jays. Considering this, it must be acknowledged that there is hardly a glowing future for the so-called Jayish cast of countenance, end quote. Least of all, we may add, among young Israelis. Summary. In part 1 of this book, I have attempted to trace the history of the Khazar Empire based on scant existing sources. In part 2, chapters 5 through 7, I have compiled the historical evidence which indicates that the bulk of Eastern Jay-Uri, and hence of the world Jay-Uri, is of Khazar Turkish rather than Semitic origin. In this last chapter, I have tried to show that the evidence from anthropology concurs with history in refuting the popular belief in Jayish race descended from the biblical tribe. Told you. From the anthropologist's point of view, 2 groups of facts militate against this belief. The wide diversity of Jays. Jays, they love their diversity. And you'll find that out in this book. Okay, let me stop. All right. The wide diversity of Jays with regard to physical characteristics and their similarity to the Gentile population amidst whom they live. Both are reflected in the statistics about bodily height, cranial index, blood groups, hair and eye color, etc. Whichever of these anthropological criteria is taken as an indicator, it shows a greater similarity between Jays and their Gentile host nation than between Jays living in different countries. To sum up this situation, I have suggested the formula, and I'm going to show you the formula. It's like Gentile, J, 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 and Gentile, Gentile, J, J. I mean, it's meaningless. It's like some stupid math formula that he came up with to prove I don't know what. The obvious biological explanation for both phenomena is miscegenation, which took different forms in different historical situations: intermarriage, large-scale proselytizing, and grape as a constant, legalized or tolerated accompaniment of war and pogrom. The belief that notwithstanding the statistical data there exists a recognizable Jayish type is based largely, but not entirely, on various misconceptions. It ignores the fact that features regarded as typically Jayish by comparison with Nordic peoples cease to appear so in a Mediterranean environment. It is unaware of the impact of the social environment on physique and countenance, and it confuses biological with social inheritance. And they love that confusion. They thrive on it. They would not, like if literally half the country knew what I am reading you in this book right now, we would not be dealing with all the BS that we're dealing with right now, right? Okay. Nevertheless, there exist certain hereditary traits which characterize a certain type of contemporary jay. In the light of modern population genetics, these can, to a large degree, be attributed to processes which operated for several centuries in the segregated conditions of the ghetto. Inbreeding, genetic drift, selective pressure. The last mentioned operated in several ways. Natural selection, example, through epidemics. Sexual selection, and more doubtfully, the selection of character features favoring survival within the ghetto walls. In addition to these, social heredity through childhood conditioning acted as a powerful formative and deformative factor. Each of these processes contributed to the emergence of the ghetto type. In the post-ghetto period, it became progressively diluted. As for the genetic composition and physical appearance of the pre-ghetto stock, we know next to nothing. In the view presented in this book, this, quote, original stock was predominantly Turkish, mixed to an unknown extent with ancient Schmalistinian and other elements. Nor is it possible to tell which of the so-called typical features, such as the Jayish nose, as a product of sexual selection in the ghetto or the manifestation of a particularly persistent tribal gene. Since nostrility is frequent among Caucasian peoples and infrequent among the Semitic Bedouins, we have one more pointer to the dominant role played by the 13th tribe in the biological history of the Jays. And then we have the appendices. So this first one is a note on spelling. The spelling in this book is consistently inconsistent. It is consistent insofar as where I have quoted other authors, I have preserved their own spelling of proper names. What else can you do? This led to the apparent inconsistency that the same person, town, or tribe is often spelt differently in different passages. Hence, Khazar, spelled K-A-Z-A-R, Khazar, spelled K-H-A-Z-A-R, Khazar, C-H-A-Z-A-R, Chozar, C-H-O-Z-A-R, Chozar, C-H-O-Z-R, etc. But also Ibn Fadlan and Ibn Fadlan, Al-Masudi and Al-Masudi. As for my own text, I have adopted that particular spelling which seemed to me to be the least bewildering to English-speaking readers who do not happen to be professional Orientalists. All right. Let's see. Do we want to... Okay. Let's talk about the sources here. A note on the sources. A, the ancient sources. Our knowledge of Khazar history is mainly derived from Arab, Byzantine, Russian, and Hebrew sources. Hebrew. What are we calling Hebrew? Because there's no such thing as Hebrew anymore. There's no such thing as that anymore. Georgian and Turkish origin. I shall comment only on some of the major sources. The Arabic. The early Arabic historians differ from all the others in the unique form of their compositions. Each event is related in the words of eyewitness or contemporaries, transmitted to the final narrator through a chain of intermediate reporters, each of whom passed on the original report to his successor. Often the same account is given in two or more slightly divergent forms, which have come down through different chains of reporters. Often, too, one event or more important detail is told in several ways on the basis of several contemporary statements transmitted to the final narrator through distinct lines of tradition. The principle still is that what has been well said once need not be told again. In other words, the writer therefore keeps as close as he can to the letter of his sources, so that quite a late writer often reproduces the very words of the first narrator. Sounds legit. All right. And this just has like a little bit, oh, Byzantine, okay. I just think this is interesting, but I'm not going to sit here and just read this. I mean, these are just like little notes about like the sources of where he got this information. So like from the Byzantine sources, he talks about Constantine, the scholar emperor with a fascinating character. And then it talks about like, let's see, the Russian, I think. Hold on, if I can turn this page. Come on, bro. Okay. Yeah, it talks about the Russian. Apart from orally transmitted folklore, legends, and songs, the earliest written source in Russian is the Pavets Vremenich Let, the tale of bygone years. That's what that's from. And then modern literature. Interesting. Very interesting. Yeah, so this is a great. Okay. And then the appendix 3, it talks about the Khazar correspondence. So I guess they have like some letters or something between, like, from, King Joseph and the Spanish statesman Hasdai Ibn Shaprat. So, and that the letters were written between 945 and 961 for the embassy from Eastern Europe. Very interesting. And then I'm just turning. This was a good book. Some implications: Israel and the diaspora. I've got like 10 minutes left. Let's keep. While this book deals with past history, it unavoidably carries certain implications for the present, the future. I'm sorry, for the present and future. In the first place, I'm aware of the danger that it may be maliciously misinterpreted as a denial of the state of Israel's right to exist. But that right is not based on the hypothetical origins of the Jewish people, nor on the mythological covenant of Abraham with God. That covenant was already delivered in the book of Joshua. I already told you. And only 2 people made it, Joshua and Caleb. Everybody else was unalived. Okay. Let's see. It is based on international law, i.e., on the United Nations decision in 1947 to partition Palestine, once a Turkish province, then a British mandated territory, which we already went through in Facts or Facts. Like, or no, was it Facts or Facts, or was it the Shemine? I think it was Facts or Facts. Like, it was not theirs to give. Like, Palestine was not Britain's to give. And yet they did it anyway. And if you go back and look in Facts or Facts, the dude that wrote that, Benjamin Friedman, is that his name? Something like that. He talks about, the trickery of the Jays to start World War I and hence World War II, because there had been so much built up, resentment from World War I that it spilled over into World War II. And that the Sheminists were plotting and scheming the whole entire time. So, yeah, these people have stuck to themselves in these ghettos and plotted and schemed their way all the way to where we are today. And they are almost ready to conquer America, unalive all the Christians, and take over the world. And you will be eating the bugs, okay? And they think that they're going to be able to hide from God. They're building all their little underground bunkers and stuff. God is not going to be mocked here, people. So, I don't want to say that I looked forward to it, because it doesn't say somewhere in the Bible that, like, not to yearn or look forward to the great and terrible day of the Lord. I definitely don't. But, I do look forward to these people getting what's coming to them by the Most High, not by any person, anyways. Okay. In the first place, I'm aware of the danger. Okay. Their right to exist, whatever the Israeli citizen racial origins and whatever illusions they entertain about them, their state exists de jure and de facto and cannot be undone except by a shminicide. How ironic. How ironic that it's a shminicide that would be necessary to get rid of them. And ironically, they're committing one against the Palestinians right now. Interesting. Very interesting. Without entering into controversial issues, one may add, as a matter of historical fact, that the partition of Schmalestein was the result of a century of peaceful Jewish immigration and pioneering effort, which provide the ethical justification for the state's legal existence. Really? Stealing people's homes, putting people out of their homes at gunpoint, that's ethical? Give me a break. Unaliving babies, shooting up churches. Like, bro, give me a break. Okay. Even the geographical origin of the native Israelis' parents or grandparents tends to be forgotten in the bubbling racial melting pot. The problem of the Khazar infusion 1,000 years ago, however fascinating, is irrelevant to modern Israel. Yeah, I bet it is. And it's actually probably really relevant to them, so much so that they're trying to hide it. They've been trying to hide it and brainwash the Western church into believing that they're the people of the Old Testament, which we all know that they're not. That's the BS I'm trying not only to detect, but to expose to all of you good people that have subscribed to my channel. Thank you so much for subscribing. The Jays who inhabit it, regardless of their checkered origins, possess the essential requirements of a nation. A country of their own, a common language, government, and army. Yeah, a common language that was invented 200 years ago. For spoken, anyways. It was written, invented like 1,000 years ago. The Jays of the diaspora have one of these requirements of nationhood. What sets them apart as a special category from the Gentiles amidst whom they live is their declared religion, whether they practice it or not. And none of them do. Israel is full of atheists. The irony, bro. The irony here. Okay? And they're calling it a diaspora. There's no diaspora, bro. This, however, creates a tragic paradox because the Jewish religion, unlike Christianity, Buddhism, or Islam, implies membership of a historical nation, a chosen race. All Jewish festivals commemorate events in national history: the Exodus from Egypt, the Maccabean Revolt, the death of the oppressor Haman, the destruction of the temple. The Old Testament is first and foremost the narrative of a nation's history. That is not their history. That's what I'm trying to say. They have stolen the Bible and they're psyoping it. They're psyoping the whole entire thing. The Bible is completed. The end times were in the New Testament, okay? All of this has already happened, with the exception of like a couple of chapters left in the book of Revelation. Oh, here we go. Let's read this part. The main, specifically Jewish literary activity of the diaspora was theological. Yet Talmud, Kabbalah, and the bulky tomes of biblical exegesis are practically unknown to the contemporary Jewish public. I doubt that, kind of. Although they're unknown to the general public, the world public at large. Jewish tradition, if that term is to have a concrete meaning, during the last 2 millennia. 2 millennia, bitch. The philosophical, scientific, and artistic achievements of the individual Jays consist in contribution to the culture of their host nations. They do not represent a common cultural inheritance or autonomous body of traditions. To sum up, the Jays of our day have no cultural tradition in common, merely certain habits and behavior patterns derived by social inheritance from the traumatic experiences of the ghetto and from a religion which the majority does not practice or believe in, but which nevertheless confers on them a pseudo-national status. Obviously, as I have argued elsewhere, the long-term solution of the paradox can only be emigration to Yasharel, or gradual assimilation to their host nations. Before Holocaust, this process was in full swing, and in 1975, Time magazine reported that American Jays, quote, tend to marry outside their faith at a high rate. Almost 1/3 of all marriages are mixed. Boom. And that is how they have, continued to spread this freaking lie that they are the people of the Old Testament, that they're the people of the book. This is why the guy that cooks in the kitchen where I work believes that his baby mama is somehow a special person because she's a J, and that his kid is somehow special because his baby mama is a J, when they're just regular people, not chosen by God. Anyways, nevertheless, the lingering influence of Jay's racial and historical message, though biased on allusion, acts as a powerful emotional break by appealing to tribal loyalty, and that's what it does. In this context, that the part played by the 13th tribe in ancestral history becomes relevant to the Jays of the diaspora. Fucking diaspora. Yet, as already said, it is irrelevant to modern Israel, which has acquired a genuine national identity. It is perhaps symbolic that Abraham Poliak, a professor of history at Tel Aviv University, and no doubt an Israeli patriot, made a major contribution to our knowledge of Jay Uri's Khazar ancestry, undermining the legend of the chosen race. It may also be significant that the native Israeli, quote, Sabra, represents physically and mentally the opposite, or the complete opposite of the, quote, typical Jay bred in the ghetto. And then it's just, we've got references here. And that's it. We have wrapped up another book, friends. Let's give ourselves a round of applause. Anyways, like, I've really just been feeling like we have got to get like through this. We got to keep moving. We got to keep moving. And I think I am going to do the Tavistock Institute next, because it was created by the Jays, and that, you know, the whole diversity is our strength thing is like, you know, they want diversity for all the white Western nations, but like, try to get them to, you know, let some of these immigrants that they're creating with all their WARs, and nobody's allowed in. They're very elitist and they're very sectarian. But then they have the nerve to call everyone else a racist or an anti-Shmemite when that is a meaningless word, because they're not Shmemetic. So anyways, I love you guys. I hope you detected the same BS that I did. And one day, hopefully, I'll have my cool background with my BS detector light that goes off when, like, I detect some BS. I have downloaded OBS onto my my Mac laptop, but I'm thinking I'm probably going to go upgrade my phone, because I'm definitely due for one. And then once I do that, then I'll have at least this phone, another phone, and then my laptop camera, to do different angles if I wanted to, or just to make the production better. Anyways, I love you guys. If you have made it through all the parts of all this book with me, bro, I freaking love you guys. A binoculars heart. Anyways, I'm getting delirious. I've been awake for too long. I got to go back to work tomorrow night, and I'm starving. So I'm gonna go now. And mwah. I love you, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.